I'm going to go right off the bat and say this, but because of the terrifying nature of Nichijou, I was shitting bricks and sweating bullets whenever I watched the show. Because you see, a piece of media doesn't need to be classified as a horror to be a horror series. Stephen King, a pioneer of the horror genre, once said, "The first movie I ever watched was a horror movie. It was Bambi. When that little deer gets caught in a forest fire, I was terrified, but also exhilarated." Anyways, speaking of deers, one of the most comedic yet blood-curdling scenes in Nichijou is the famed deer vs principal fight. In what's widely regarded as the best fights in anime, there is a sense of multi-layered horror present in this situation, which remains to be a motif for the rest of the show, as truly good horror doesn't try to scare us with grotesque imagery. It tries to unsettle the audience through subverting norms and creating sequences which disturb the natural order, like a deer wandering into school for example. After unsettling the audience with the deer's ominous entrance, the exhilarating showdown between man and deer begins, which Yuko is a sole spectator to horror, which she's mesmerized and yet terrified by as she wonders what is happening before her very eyes. The true horror of this situation is not the uncanny act of violence taking place before her, but rather it's the breakdown of normality, because what we as humans consciously fear in our day-to-day lives isn't being jumped by a killer clown, it's changed to our daily life, which is the title of the show. And this title exists to mock Yuko in this situation, and on the surface level, might not be psychologically terrifying, but once you place yourself in Yuko's shoes, the torment begins. And this is what psychological horror is all about. And because I personally relate to Yuko a lot, this scene put me in dire straits. In fact, what horror is all about is what comedy is all about. Both look to build tension to create a sense of intrigue before having a release of this tension. So the only thing that differentiates the two is perspective. So, if you look at Nano and the professor's relationship from an outside view, you'll see a suburban family containing a talking cat, a humanoid robot, and a genius child. And it's a version of a typical family that takes place in this household. And you'll think, haha, that's pretty funny. But once you start to figure out the implications of this comedic situation, you'll be confronted by a very daunting reality. Because imagine that your body is in the complete whim and control of an emotionally immature 9-year-old who can turn your hands into machine guns. Well, that's the inexplicable reality which Shinonome Nano faces in her day-to-day life, having her arms shoot out cake rolls at the bidding of a sadistic professor who insists on having a flamboyant key on Nano's back, and for which most of the show she begs to be taken off to no avail, making her always stand out like a sore thumb, outing her as a robot. This is an example of body horror, which remains consistent through the show. As an enlightened individual myself, this deeply unsettled me, as I saw this notion for what it is. A metaphor for the control in which the soft power held by authority figures in our lives holds on us, which weighs us down and alienates us. This notion is present in our day-to-day lives, whether it be control from social trends, institutionalization from schools, or the overarching eye of the pigs, police. And if there's one thing I learned from Nichijou, it's that we should all fuck up the pigs the same way Mio did. Legal disclaimer, I'm not responsible for inciting any violence based on this video, so yeah, don't punch a police officer, unless he's really asking for it. Anyways, in conclusion, by subverting the motif of the name of the show, Nichijou or Our Daily Lives, we are presented with satirical versions